Hello there, and welcome. And we're glad to be with you again. This is one of our breakthrough briefings. I think this is the fifth that we've done. And like all of the others, what we do is we take an issue that's very relevant at the moment that we've actually seen amongst our community and amongst our clients or amongst ourselves, and we put together a briefing conversation of some of the things that we found out, some of the things we know, and some of the questions we could ask, but also so that you can reflect on it and start to look at it in your own life or your work or your private life. And today we're looking at the fact that so many people have put their life on hold, or their work, our businesses have put their business on hold as a result of the pandemic, of course. But what we see within that is these patterns are present anyway. They're always there. It's just that the pandemic and the conditions of the pandemic, the situation we found ourselves in, has actually brought all of that, a lot of that to the surface. It's like we say that COVID has sort of amplified a lot of things, and not that they weren't there before, but that now they're fully visible, and they're here for us to tackle. So just ask yourself, over the last year or so, how much of your life, whether it's your professional life, or whether it's your personal life and your family life, or whether it's within your business, how much has been put on hold as a result of the conditions that we found ourselves in? And even though we can lay the responsibility of that at the door of the pandemic and the conditions, actually what you'll see through today is there's also there's a lot of this to do with mindset. And they are the things that we want to cover and we want to explore, and give examples and so on, so that you can reflect on this and get your own insights. And towards the end of it, we'll also give you some tips on what we can do in this situation that you can implement immediately. So where I want to start actually is a story that I heard some time ago, and but it's always been with me, and it was given to me as an example of the power of compounding. Apparently, Einstein said that none of his ideas were as good as the idea of compounding. Whether he said that or not, this story was to show the benefits of it. And it was two boys. Let's call them Max and Zach. And they were 19 years old, so they're just starting out on their adulthood, their career. And Max decides that what he's going to do is he's going to invest for his retirement. And what he's going to start now at 19, and he's going to put $300 away every month without fail, for a certain number of years. And in fact, he does that, and he does it for 8 years. So he does it until he's 27, and then he thinks, right, I've got my investment pot. By that time, his total investment is $28,800, and he's been putting it into a sort of a tax-free environment, at least till he takes it out. And let's give him a generous 10% return. I wish we could find that now, but anyway, that was the story. So he's got 28,800 at 27 years old, and he's going to leave that then until his retirement age, 60 or 65. Now, Zach, his friend, he decided he was too young at 19, and he'd wait till he got a proper career and everything else. And so he waited for those 8 years. So when Max stopped saving, Zach started saving, and he put the same amount away. He put $300 away every month without fail, same environment, same investment environment, tax-free, 10%. And he carried on until he was 65. So his total invested by that time was $140,000. So we've got Max with 28,800, and we've got Zach with 140,000 at age 65. So who's got the biggest retirement fund at that point? And those of you in the know will know. But if you were like me, I would say, well, come on, it's going to be Zach, isn't it? He's put so much more away. He's invested 140,000. But the astounding answer is that at 65, when they start on the retirement life, Zach has now made, he's accrued $1.5 million. And Max has accrued, and he hasn't been saving since 27. He's accrued $1.86 million at that point. And when I first heard that story, I was astounded. And the first thing I did is sort of calculate how much I've lost by not investing. But that's the point. It was given as a motivation to start investing, and it certainly didn't work with me. But actually, if you flip it, what you can look at is it's like the reverse of compounding, the absence of it, the missed opportunity of it. That what does it cost? What does it cost you for those first 8 years? And I'm not going to do the figures, but you know, it costs Zach a lot more. Mm-hmm. And that's the same for all of us. So this year that things have been on hold, what does it cost us to keep them on hold for a year? And more importantly, what's it going to cost us going forward if we don't start the things? Because there's another phenomena that I'm going to come to, that the fact that we've been putting things on hold actually puts us into a vicious cycle where we keep more and more on hold. And we'll come to that later.
And I just love that story. So Bart shared that with myself and the wider Breakthrough team about 4 weeks ago. And it's been really funny because we keep coming back to it and we keep noticing all of the different areas in the kind of wider world that it applies to. One example with, you know, the most macro, fundamental, enormous impact for all of us is the climate. So we just had the Leaders Summit talking about the climate, moving a little bit more towards action rather than just talking about and not doing anything a week ago. The first thing I'd say about that is it's amazing. It took them 4 weeks to organise that because it was all done virtually. You know, from when Joe Biden invited them, you got kind of the 40 top world leaders. That would normally take a couple of years to try and get all of the security and travel and everything and logistics organised for that. But anyway, so they got them all together. And suddenly they were talking more about the 2030 deadline, that looming major deadline, than the 2050 deadline, although a lot of it's still hanging around out there in this sort of very distant 2050. But they realized finally that if they don't act now in the next 10 years, the compounding impact of what's going to happen to the planet is so catastrophic that they can't afford to wait anymore. And in fact, thinking back on what Bart's just said, what have they already lost? What was already wasted from the last 10, 20, 30 years where everybody was sitting on their hands and not doing anything? So this is a fantastic example of this, that if you don't act now, every single day makes a difference when it comes to the climate emergency.
What it's brought us to with the climate emergency is that we knew everything that we know now 10 years ago.
Exactly.
A decade ago. And, you know, the Paris Agreement was more than a decade ago. But we've not had the sense of urgency that now we keep getting, because I think that certainly every year or so, some people say we're past the point of no return. And there is that point. There's a tipping point where, you know, there is no return from it. And whether we're there or not, whether you believe it or not, the science doesn't lie. And at some point we will get there. And, you know, looking at some of the costs already with this, I mean, I saw some figures that if this is for the US, that if they start investing now, implementing now, to get to net zero by 2050, if they start implementing in 2021, then it will be around a $320 billion investment. But if they wait till 2030 to start implementing for a 2050 net zero, it's going to be $750 billion. And if they wait until 2040, and by then it might actually be too late, this is just the economics of it, then it's over 900 billion. So, you know, there's the monetary cost, but of course, as we get nearer to it, we also have to implement differently. And that's the other aspect of this, that at the moment we can sort of implement from business as usual. Whereas if we wait till 2030, we're going to have to implement alternative energies and so on. There are 6 times business as usual. So it'll require a lot more innovation. It'll put a lot more stress and a lot more overload. Now, this is the big sort of big world problem, but bring this back down to your businesses. Where are specific areas in your business where you've gone into a holding pattern, and to actually get out of that is going to start to put more stress on the business anyway.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's the big macro example. You then kind of can filter that right down. So to an individual level, and I guarantee maybe it's you yourselves, or certainly friends or colleagues, maybe family members, you'll notice this example in some of them. We had a colleague who had been accepted to do his MBA program, right? So very exciting. We all celebrated for him back in 2019 or whenever it was. And he was due to start last September. And whereas many universities have kind of moved their courses online, or they kind of tried to make different things, in this particular instance, they actually just said, look, guys, we're just going to postpone it for a year. So this kind of cohort, come back in a year, we'll try and sort something out then. So he was kind of left, you know, and at that moment, he could have made the decision to put that on hold. Say, okay, well, I'll just wait for the next 12 months and carry on then. But on reflecting on that story about the 2 19-year-olds, you know, I really looked at it and thought, in that year, he would have missed out on more than just the learning opportunity. And this is the same for all of the other children out there. Maybe your kids or friends of yours who have children who haven't been going to school in the same way. It's the same kind of learning impact. They don't just lose the time that they could have been learning. They also lose that year where they could be implementing it. And certainly in our colleague's case, he's losing that time to actually start applying in real time the lessons that he's learning on that MBA. So he'd have lost a lot more. He'd have lost the compounding of that ability to tangibly see the effects of his learning. And of course, then I'd have lost the fantastic opportunity to see him implementing that stuff in the business. So you can macro that up across all sorts of L&D experiences, whether that's from children all the way up to our colleagues. But instead, he didn't do that, and he decided, I'm just going to go out there and learn for myself, and I'm going to be self-taught as much as I can this year. And he's been reading, he's been going on courses, he's been doing different programs all online, he's been asking questions, and he's been then applying that knowledge straight into the business, and already we're reaping the rewards of that. So that's the difference between, I can just, you know, what would have been the different future if he had decided in that moment, all right, I'm just going to wait a year, versus taking some action, choosing not to get into that holding pattern and doing something really proactive. And potentially, actually, he might even have learned more by doing it this way because he's had that self-start motivation involved. So that was another example that we thought of. And then, you know, as Bart was saying, back to your businesses, this is something that we see long before COVID. Every time we engage with a new client, there is a debate around when to start the breakthrough program, right? So for those of you who have worked with us, which I expect will be the majority of you on the call today, you know it's a big undertaking, you know it's a big time investment, you know that there's a lot kind of riding on it, and it's supposed to be this transformational catalyst. But there's always this kind of fear amongst senior executives that if they don't start after they've fixed all the problems, then it's going to be a bit too messy. And we have to kind of debate with them. Actually, the whole point is start when it's a bit messy, because the program will help you to sort through those challenges, right? And by delaying, you're actually losing that fantastic ability to make yourselves more efficient, to get a handle on your time, to get a handle on your priorities, to look at the strategic overview by doing the program sooner rather than later. And it's funny, we have a 50-50 success rate, don't we, Bart? Where 50% of people probably say, it does make sense. All right, let's start now and just get going. And 50% say, I want to wait till everything's perfect and then we can do the program. And of course, those get a big benefit, but they've lost out on all of that extra time that we could have been supporting them and changing behaviors and mindset while they were trying to fix all the stuff that was not so effective.
Well, yes, and one of the feedbacks we often get is from people who run our programs, who actually, you know, they are the ones that actually sponsor and buy the program and so on. One of the constant feedbacks for years is, I wish we'd have started this earlier. So,
So true.
That certainly shows up for us. So, and with all of this, we mentioned compounding, we mentioned climate change, we mentioned things that's happening in our own lives and so on. One of the mindset things is that we now live in exponential times, and you know, certainly when my parents were born, we were at the very start of that sort of exponentiality. And before that, we lived in linear times, pretty much. But now we're on the real upward curve of the exponential curve. And one of the problems with our neural system and our human mind is that the mind tends to think linearly, and it has a lot more difficulty thinking exponentially and actually imagining exponentially. And that's why in a lot of cases, we don't get round to doing things at the time we should do and could do. And actually we leave it longer than we need to. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like you to do a short, easy exercise. And I'd like you to just for some awareness and identification. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to look at your life and give it a 360-degree view. You could call it a wheel, the wheel of life. And so imagine a circle, and that you're dividing your life up into segments around that circle. And pick areas of your life which are really important to you. So there's your professional life, there's your financial life, there's your family life, there's your social life, there's your health and wellness life, there's your fitness life, that might be different, there's your adventure life, there's your contribution life, whatever it is. You know, you can have as many or as few as you want. And then within each of those segments, I want you to just identify areas that you have put on hold. And maybe by doing this, you'll also identify some areas that are on hold that you didn't know about. And just spend a couple of minutes now doing that. If you've got some paper or you've got your journal, then put it in that journal. That what's one or two insights you've got from doing that?
Do you want them to write that down, Bart, or just generate it, or?
Yeah, just generate it, write it in. Yeah, always good
Yeah.
to write it. Okay, good. So let's look at some of the things that actually cause this or exacerbate it. And like I said earlier, these patterns are already with us. These holding patterns that stop us from moving forward. And I think one of the things from an emotional point of view is that one of the key things for human beings that links to the sense of fulfillment is progress. So it's when we feel that we're progressing. So when we feel we're progressing in areas of our life, like the areas you've just segmented there, that sense of progress, for some it's a sense of growth, but even the sense of growth is some type of progress. For some it's a sense of of hitting milestones and so on, again, a sense of progress. So this area of putting things on hold, what happens is progress stops. And
I'm just going to stop you there a second. Sorry, problem with your microphone. So I don't know if there's a piece of paper clanking on it.
yeah,
That might just be me hearing it funny.
can
There
you
we
hear
go.
it?
Is that better?
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Good.
Yeah.
Where was I? Progress. So
Progress.
so with that sense of progress missing, then we feel that emptiness. We feel that things are not happening in the way we want to. And actually, what can happen then is we can get more and more helpless with this. You know, it's the phenomenon of learned helplessness, and that can lead us into that downward spiral. And that's sort of what we're looking at now. Before I go forward, look, this whole time of the pandemic, I know that some people have done incredibly well out of it. They've been incredibly successful. Businesses have been very successful, and so on. But that's not what we're talking about today. We could have a whole briefing session on the fact that the pandemic is a crisis, but it's also an opportunity. What we're looking at are some of the patterns that don't serve us, that have been magnified from this, and maybe we're still left with them. So I just wanted to clarify that. So one of the key patterns here is procrastination. And in terms of procrastination, you can identify three patterns within procrastination itself. Three avatars, if you like. And the first one is the promiser. So promising. So some people, and by the way, I'm not saying it's you, but you may know people like this. Some people are immediately promising things and promising many things. And actually, many of those things aren't delivered because they get into a cycle of promising and under-delivering, or promising and not delivering at all. And of course, what that can lead to is two things. First of all, the people that they're promising to now don't see them as reliable, now don't see them as predictable. And going even further, they may even lack trust in them. So it certainly has effect on other people. But it has an effect on the person as well who has got into this loop of promising and over-promising. Because basically, you know at some level that you're not delivering, and you know at some level that you're not being your word. So what that can bring in is all sorts of unconscious integrity problems where you actually feel uncomfortable with yourself, and ultimately it starts to affect your self-worth and your self-value. So that's one pattern of procrastination that we see. The second pattern is planning. So what we have there is we have people who are planning all the time and love the fact of planning, and maybe make fantastic displays of planning, have their diaries full of plans, but actually don't follow them through. And with anything to do with procrastination, it's the lack of follow through. One of the things we say is in breakthrough that there is no breakthrough without follow through. And most projects in the world fail because of lack of follow through. So the planners are people who are great at planning and love the fact of planning, but actually what they don't do is they don't act, or if they act, they don't follow through on that action. And that's the second pattern of procrastination. And the third pattern, which is one of the most common patterns, which is actually at the root of a lot of procrastination and procrastinators, is the pattern of perfectionism. That actually, I can't start it until it's reached a certain point. I've got to prepare in this way. This has got to be there before this can actually be actioned and implemented and so on. And, you know, the example that Zannah talked about with clients who working with us say, well, maybe now is not the right time. That's a sign of a type of perfectionism, that at some point there will be a right time, and that will be the perfect time to carry on. And well, the problem with perfectionism is that can get hold of you and actually run your life. So that, you know, if you're a perfectionist in one area of your life, it spreads out and it becomes that type of indecision and perfectionism in all of your life. And of course, one of the things that we say is perfectionism is the worst possible standard. And the reason we say that is because the standard of perfectionism can never be attained. You know, how many possibilities are there to be perfect? Well, there's one possibility to be perfect. But how many possibilities are there to be better? How many possibilities are there to be faster? How many possibilities are there to be excellent? There's many, many possibilities. So, you know, by adhering to perfectionism, that's a mindset that's going to keep you stuck. So that's the perfectionist. Sorry, they're the procrastination patterns.
Love that they're our new 3 Ps as well.
Hmm?
Everybody's familiar with the other 3 Ps, the passengers, prisoners, and players. Now we have a new 3 Ps, the procrastination.
The new 3.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
I'll be using it a lot.
So that's procrastination. So again, following this, start to identify where you're procrastinating. Listen, something I did years ago, it worked fantastically. And it was the first time that I read the book, The 7 Habits. So you're probably all familiar with that. The 7 Habits, and Stephen Covey. And in there, I actually did a lot of the exercises that come at the end of the chapters. And there was one exercise which I always remember because it really worked very well. And I may have modified it a bit. But what I did is I put myself on a 30-day anti-procrastination diet. Yeah. And what I did is whenever I notice, it was about awareness. Whenever I notice myself putting something off, then instantly in my mind, I said, well, I've got to do it. And so, you know, oh, I must phone so-and-so at a certain time. No, I've got to do it now. Yeah. And I would do it. And it was uncomfortable. It was really uncomfortable because I realized that, you know, the pattern I'd got into, my comfort zone was, well, let me put it off. Let me do it next week and so on. And I may have done it next week, but it was the act of doing that and putting it off and staying in a comfort zone about it that I was wanting to break through. And the 30-day procrastination diet really worked. I really recommend it to anybody. Why did I take 30 days? Because it takes about that time to actually smash a habit. And, you know, I had the habit of procrastinating. I had the habit of, I didn't even believe I was procrastinating because I would always have a date that I was going to do it, but it just wouldn't be now. And so that's where I was doing it. So, and of course, the comfort zone is where we stay when we get into these habitual patterns of procrastination and putting things off and putting things on hold. That's what we're doing. And in a weird sense, it's called the comfort zone, but it isn't comfortable. And it certainly isn't comfortable after a period of time when you look back and think, what could I have done then? I mean, another thing that I did once, which I'll just share with you. I've always journaled, and one time I decided, you know what I'm going to put in my journal? I'm going to have a chapter which is my journal of lost opportunities and missed opportunities. And I tell you what, it's frightful that. You want to do it sometime, okay? So that brings me now to another area which is connected with mindset, body, emotions, and it's a state. So we talked about mindset. Now I want to talk about a state. And this state was discovered, or in fact, the state was already there, but it didn't have a name. And it was given a name in 2002 by a sociologist called Corey Keyes. And he called that state the state of languishing. And it's actually a great word as a descriptor of this, because what the state of languishing is it's a state that's midway between, look, the mental health spectrum. So the professionals and the experts, they see the mental health spectrum ranging from sort of depression, in this dimension anyway, depression to flourishing, where in flourishing we're at the peak of our well-being, and we have a strong sense of meaning. We have a sense of mastery. We feel valued, and we have a strong sense of purpose. So that's how we are when we're flourishing. That's how we wake up when we're flourishing every day. And of course, depression at the other extreme is the peak of ill-being, where we feel drained and where we feel worthless and where we feel that we're not valued, and lots of other things as well. So languishing comes sort of between those. And it's a sort of non-state state. So it's a state where we're stagnating. So a languishing state is we're stagnating. We might feel resigned. We might feel apathy. What we do feel is a sort of emptiness around things. And it might not be extreme. It might be just low level. And it may just be below the level of consciousness. But what it does is it dulls our motivation. It disrupts our ability to focus. It lowers our drive or removes our drive, and we get loss of engagement. And actually, those of you that are on this, that are in businesses and are leaders in business and managing business, you may not be in this state, but you will know people that are. Mm-hmm. And some of your people may be in this state already as we speak, if they're working remotely. When it's time to come back to the workplace, this may be a state that's very difficult to break out of. And even though this state is not by any means, lack of mental health, what this state has been seen to is that it is a predictor of people who further down the line, if they can't get out of it, it will lead to that. So it's an important state, and Corey Keyes, one of the things that he said at the time was that the first thing is it's important to name it, because it doesn't have a name and it doesn't have a description, and that's what he did. He did that, and it's also the absence. It's not ill-being, but it's the absence of well-being. It's not burnout. It's not depression. You can actually have energy in it. But what you've lost is this sense of purpose. And it's about loss, because he discovered it, particularly amongst grieving people. So people who had, they'd had a significant death in their family. They were in this period of grief, and this is where they went from grief into languishing. And what we've got now is, over the last year, we've got loss. We've got a loss of normal life, and some people feel that loss more than others, and so they're the people that we need to be aware of. But also be aware of yourself, areas of your life in the wheel that you just finished. Go back to that, and which areas are you're actually languishing in those areas, And languishing is no progress. And like I said, progress is linked to feeling of fulfillment. So no progress, and it's very difficult to feel fulfilled. So what would we do about that if we found that we were in that state of languishing? Well, the first thing is to become aware of it. And now that I've given you the name, languishing, there's more and more people now are starting to write and talk about it. So you will see it coming up. I know there was an article in The Guardian a couple of weeks ago about this. There was an article in the New York Times last week about this. So people are now starting to home in on this. And how we get out of this really is to get into action. But to get into action in small ways, which get us into a state of flow. So one of the things that we do know is that those of you that have done a program remember that, you know, the blue train, as opposed to the red train, is when we step out of fight or flight into flow. And so once we do that, then we start to marshal resources that are just not accessible while we're on the red train, while we're in that fight and flight. Those resources are closed down. When we're languishing, some of our resources are closed down. But flow is a key to this. And one example that I've seen is somebody who every morning gets his body into gear and goes for a run and so on, but then gets his mind into gear. And he gets his mind into gear by you know, an exercise, a word game or something like that. But it's got to have these three things. The first thing is it's got to have a challenge, but not a massive challenge. What we call a just manageable challenge. A just manageable challenge is not out of your comfort zone into your overload zone. It's out into your stretch zone. And that just manageable challenge needs to lead to a quick win. Not guaranteed, because it's a challenge. And the quick win needs to lead to a reward. And the reward gives us a dose of dopamine, so a small dose of dopamine, which keeps us in that cycle. And actually dopamine itself keeps us and puts us into flow, into a state of flow. So we've got just manageable challenges, small wins, small rewards, and it's a path. There's small steps and it's a path into flow. And we can do that to really condition and prime our mind as well as priming our body every morning. And then we can tackle the bigger things.
I know that I used to do that. That's something that I think some people miss on their commute, actually. There's been a lot of talk online about how to kind of recreate your morning commute if you find that you're working from home at the moment. And doing a little Sudoku on the tube, or, you know, playing a game on your phone or whatever, it does sort of get you into that, almost it's like a meditative state. You're not having to think about other stuff and you're relaxed, but you've got an active mind. And I think it's very, very effective. So we've got some further tips, I think, that kind of build on that, just to give you a structure of what you can do. So if you found that you've got yourself stuck on hold, or you find that you're working maybe with a colleague or a team member or a family member who's got a bit stuck, this is the pathway that you need to take, and this is what you do. So again, grab a pen, jot this down. The first, as Bart was saying, is to be aware. Okay, so identify, as you've been doing and starting in today's session, where you're on hold, and then ask yourself, what's stopping you? What is the thing that's blocking you? You know, what's getting in the way? It's probably going to be mindset related, all right? There might be many, many external factors out there, but at the end of the day, when you strip those back, it'll be something around your mindset. So what's it costing you? Ask yourself that. What's it costing you? It might not be something financial. It might be about your spirit, you know, whatever, but what's it costing you? It might be in your relationships. It might be something to do with your future. And think, you know, again, back to what we were talking about with compounding. So what's it going to cost you further down the line as well by not taking action now? What might you have already lost? And now think about how you can shift into action. So visualize two futures. This will help you to kind of do that. Okay, visualize a future where you don't do anything, you stay in your holding pattern, and a future where you actually go out today and you do something differently, and just look, you know, play with that, look at what they both look like, look at how you feel, look at how you're behaving, and what those futures, what the different trajectories have brought you. All right, so next thing is to declare it. So rope somebody in, okay, and declare what your intentionality now is. What is your goal? What are you going to do? Make sure it's not just the promising procrastination, okay, and that you actually get this person to almost kind of sponsor you. And, you know, it's always going to be much more likely that you'll achieve it if you seek that support and if you get someone else involved and they can help to kind of move you along with this goal. So that's the declare. So we've had be aware, declare. Then, of course, it's take action. So get full on and do it, right? Do something. And it might be something really small, like Bart was saying, you know, just a simple word game, something in the morning that will help to kind of gee you up and get you going again. But whatever it is that works for you to shift you out of that place of procrastination and into execution. Maybe it's a certain email that you need to send. Maybe it's a task that you need to set. But whatever it is, it's got to shift you out of procrastination and into execution. So that's the take action. And then finally, as Bart was saying, that hit of dopamine, you need to celebrate the quick wins. There's no point just waiting until the big thing's been done, all right? And again, this is relevant whether it's a huge project that you're procrastinating, or maybe it's a big initiative that your organization's been putting off, or maybe just down to a fitness program that you wanted to set for yourself. If you don't celebrate the small milestones along the way, you're not going to have the energy and the motivation to last the course of it. So identify them, celebrate them, talk to that person who's helping and sponsoring you about it, and this will spur you to do more and more and more and more. And then, of course, at the end, celebrate when you've actually achieved it and you've achieved the goal. So, Bart, is there anything else you want to add before we move to Q&A? My God, we're on time for once. This is a miracle.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil the fact that we're on time.
Just one more thing. All right, Felicity, do you have some questions that have come in from the audience, from the participants, please?
Yeah, we've just had a few starting to come in. If anyone has any more, please do post them in the chat. I think you've got the option of posting them just to the panelists or to everyone. So if anything occurs at all, please do share it. Let me just see, we've had one in.
So will you read them out to us? That would be fantastic. Thank you.
So how would you use actions to help a procrastinator in your team, especially if they don't even recognize that they are one of those procrastination types?
Yeah.
Bart, do you want to start?
Yeah, I will. So if they're not aware that they're a procrastinator, then that's a good start. That actually, you know, they need to become aware themselves. So any conversations and powerful conversations you can have with them that leads them to see that they are doing the procrastinating. And when I say, you know, a powerful conversation, I don't mean suddenly blame them and say, oh, you're a procrastinator. That's not going to work at all. Their listening will close down at that point. But really, you know, a conversation, it's almost a coaching conversation that you have with them. And actually that also is one way that you can deal with somebody who is procrastinating. If you've got a coach, or you are a coach, or you can get them a coach, you can coach them out of that. That's a powerful way of doing it. But really, they need to own this, and they need to start to see what it is and what's blocking them. What's the, you know, underlying most procrastination is some fear. So what's the fear? What's the fear that's stopping them? Now, if they are a dyed-in-the-wool procrastinator that's procrastinating on everything, you need to, first of all, see if they can become aware of that. And if they can become aware of it, then move them on to then doing something about it. And again, the clue is in the small steps. Get them to start breaking their patterns, get them to start building new patterns. If that doesn't work, then, you know, my view is if they're being employed by you and employed by the company, and this is something that they can't get out of, what's it costing you? What's it costing you as a business to actually support that? So try the coaching, try the self-awareness and the self-discipline and so on. But beyond that, think about what it's costing you to keep that person.
And I think just to build on that, start with the most generous assumption you can have for that person. So why could they be procrastinating? And sometimes it can feel like someone's procrastinating, but they just have a very different personality type. It might be that they struggle to hone in on a decision, right? So this is something Bart and I always laugh about, because we have very different personality types when it comes to decision making. I want to just make the decision. He'd like to really think about it. Somewhere in the middle is probably the most effective. And it might seem like someone's procrastinating, but actually they're just processing information in a different way. So seek to understand first, give them the most generous assumption. And as Bart says, then make sure that they're aware of the impact that that's having. Felicity, what else?
By the way, I think when you start to look at what's causing this in this person, it may be that in the past, they've made a decision and actually they've been hurt for making that decision. So there's something that's, what's stopping them is the fear of that happening again. So that's why I say a really, powerful conversation with them about where you can give some feedback, but also find out from them what's at the source of all of this.
Okay, one of our questions is, how can I motivate the leadership team above me who are resistant to change and want to wait and hold off on taking any action?
Good luck. No, that's not the answer you want, is it? It's not the answer you want.
Can we edit that bit out?
I said that because that is so common.
It's so common.
We meet that so much. And it's not easy. It really isn't easy. But what you've got to do is you've got to. I would enroll. I would divide to conquer in a way. So who is it on that leadership team that you can enroll in making decisions, and then working from them, increase the number of people. So that's one way of going about it, because it won't be that the whole team is like that. Some of them will want to get on. But then the other way of doing it is actually to demonstrate these two futures. Here's the future if we make this decision, and here's the future if we don't. And this is what it's going to cost us. And once people can really be associated with what it's going to cost us, because by putting things off, what we do is we go into denial about what it's going to cost. What we might do as well is magnify the cost of not doing it right.
Yeah.
So let's not do anything. And that links with that perfectionist type of thing. But it's the fear of doing it wrong, the fear of losing by making this decision. But if you can show them these two futures of, if we do this decision and it's a success, here's what we're going to get. And if we don't do this, here's what it's going to cost us. Here's what it's going to cost us in a month, in 3 months, in a year.
And again, think of the most generous assumption. So, I can think of several organizations at the moment who, they're needing to put things on hold because in their eyes, they don't want to overload people anymore. People are very busy. You've all had an extremely strenuous 12 months. And now there's a lot of conversation about how can we ensure there's resilience in the team and that this is sustainable and we can keep growing. So the thought of maybe layering something else on top seems very unappealing right now. They're not necessarily doing it because they're just wanting to put it on hold. They're doing it with the best interest of you, the people at heart, right? But if in the long term it's actually going to hurt you more by not doing something now, that's what needs to become apparent. And if that in fact means we need to take away some of the other stuff we're doing, that's often the thing that gets missed. You maybe need to take away some of the other stuff that's going on so that you can prioritize the key initiatives that have been put on hold, and that really now is the time to do that, because as Bart says, what's the cost of not doing it now? So again, best possible assumption, find somebody that you can start to make a coalition with, and then look at the two different futures. Felicity, what else?
We've had another meaty one in. So someone has said, my job market is particularly unstable. I'm unhappy where I am, but how can I look at moving when things are so turbulent in the market and also in the world still?
Such a great question. I might steal that to begin with. I've
sure.
had so many friends who are nervous about this, and actually some people at Breakthrough as well, and various other things, who just feel like, is now the time to make a career change? surely this is the worst time you could possibly make a career change. It's so risky out there. And of course, there are some very real risks associated with that around, you know, paying the mortgage and all of those things that are very real. And I'm not diminishing that, but there are loads of jobs out there. And this is a real mindset block. There are, I promise you, so many different jobs out there. There are industries that have boomed, absolutely boomed during this crisis. And we have the pleasure of working with some of them, and trust me, they're doing great. So yes, there are some places where you're going to struggle to find work, and I understand that maybe your particular kind of role or the career that you've built out might be a bit tricky at the moment in terms of what's transferable, but start looking. And we were having another conversation related back to those two 19-year-olds about, you know, mortgages, and the person that says, oh no, I couldn't live in London, I can't afford a mortgage here. Well, have you actually gone and found a broker? Because if you just look at the banks, of course you can't. But if you go and find someone, there are different options available for you. And I guarantee that there would be some choices there, right? And it's the same with jobs. So really start to investigate. Don't just get scared to start. The fear of failure might stop you starting. Just break through that, push through it, and start looking, because there's no harm in looking. And I guarantee you will find that there are lots of things out there. It might just take a little bit more time than normal to find the particular niche that will work for you. And also I would recommend getting some proper careers advice, or looking at a book like Squiggly Careers or something like that, that will help you to look at where your values are, what you're passionate about, what you can make money from, what your friends and family think are actually your talents, rather than maybe what you think of yourself. Often it's quite different from what we see as our own talents, what other people see in us, and hone in on all that information, and then look at maybe there's something completely different that you could be doing that would bring you a lot more joy and fulfillment than the place that you're in at the moment. So do that groundwork first. I think it's worth putting the time into it. And then you know that you've mitigated the risk, you know that you're kind of looking at the different options that are out there. But I promise you, there are lots and lots of different things that are going on from very successful companies at the moment.
That was our final question for now. So I think maybe in good breakthrough spirit, we can wrap up exactly on time.
Yes, I love it. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us today. We love doing these, and we'll definitely be doing some more as the year goes on. If you would like to follow us at Breakthrough Global on LinkedIn, that would be fantastic. Felicity is going to post the link. There it is. So just click on that and you can follow us. You can get lots more tips, information, kind of articles, everything, you know, as well as just updates on our news there, as well as on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So please do follow us on those social media channels. We are very excited that we are going to be launching a podcast in the autumn. So please watch this space. This is going to be an opportunity for us to interview a combination of leaders, experts, some who we've worked with, some who we haven't worked with, on a number of different topics, everything from mastery to the power of ideas, to women's leadership, to diversity and inclusion, to leadership principles, you name it, it's going to all be covered on there. So you'll be receiving more information, I expect, about that in the coming months. And yes, if you want any more information about Breakthrough, please visit our website or get in touch with myself, Felicity, or Bart directly. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time. And move into action. That's the main thing to take away. Move into action.
Yeah, one thing I'll add, if any of you want to contact us with, you know, questions that you didn't ask, or issues that you know, maybe more serious than we've covered here, don't hesitate. Yeah, don't be in a holding pattern. Just contact us.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you so much, and thank you very much, Felicity, for hosting. Thanks, Bart. See you all soon.
Felicity. Thanks, Zannah.
Bye. Bye.